My friends, the following is a conversation I had with the one and only Dr. David Doak, legendary video game designer and developer, credited in GoldenEye 007 with the original screenplay of the game in the end credits, though he was certainly more involved than just that in many and all aspects of building the game we've come to know and love. This conversation took place somewhere in 2017 or 2018. Sometime after starting my SpeedLore series in January 2017, Dr. Doak reached out to me to see if I wanted to chat about the game, and after some back and forth, we made it happen. I messed up the audio pretty badly as a noob back then, with Doak's side being way too quiet, but I eventually had a viewer fix the compression and clean up the audio for me. I originally wanted to do a full edit of this conversation, showing the scenes and glitches discussed on screen, but at well over 2 hours, it just felt way too daunting for me at the time. And so as a result of being unsure what to do with the conversation, the audio lingered as an obscure Soundcloud upload with only about 1,000 views and low discoverability. Recently, though, I remembered this conversation and I dug up the old audio, and so now I will add some simple visuals to it here, with some of my old fireside ambiance for old time's sake. Again, this conversation took place in either late 2017 or early 2018, so we may reference some outdated strategies, glitches, and world records, but overall there's a lot of good insight here about the game, the backstory, potential glitches, and game-breaking efforts. Between myself, who has speedrun and made content about this game for nearly 20 years, and Dr. Doak, one of the guys who made the game himself. Who knows, maybe some nugget or kernel from this conversation will be caught at the right time for a new strategy or breakthrough to happen in the game. I will provide timestamps for your listening ease. Enjoy.
Hi, Ryan.
How's it going?
Good. Early in the morning for you.
Well, you know what, it is, but it's almost late for me, I guess. You know, I'm kind of one of those night owls, and just finished up my stream playing GoldenEye, actually, so it's a good time to chat for sure.
So do you stream most days, or?
Yeah, most days. Nothing like a lot of streamers have like a set schedule, but I just stream. I try to stream 4 or 5 times a week or so.
Well, it's just such an alien kind of culture to me. I mean, I met earlier this year. I met some YouTubers at a kind of retro games thing and got to know them reasonably well. And it was fascinating, even when they were at this conference. But we'd go and do stuff, but they'd be back sitting, recording stuff and setting stuff up. It's just massively, they're kind of, you're on all the time, almost.
No, you definitely are. Certainly, yeah, no, the YouTubers and streamers and all that kind of stuff for sure. I mean, it's kind of funny hearing it from you that it's so foreign, because like I associate, like you're obviously involved in video game culture, and I just associate it closely. But I mean, it is just kind of funny to hear it's so foreign. I guess you're always more of a 9 to 5 guy, eh?
Well, when we were, say for example, when we were making GoldenEye, which is obviously relevant. We pretty much didn't have any routine internet access in the office. It was completely done in a vacuum. So you didn't, you maybe went on the net occasionally to check things, but there wasn't really much there. There wasn't YouTube or anything.
Yeah. I mean, what year did you guys start working on? Like 95, 96?
Yeah, I think it started, I guess, 94, 95. I wasn't working at Rare then. I joined Rare in 95. And then was, I guess, properly on the GoldenEye team in 96, 95, 96. Because when I joined Rare, I joined as a system administrator, so I was looking after the computers, and basically, I did that for a while, but kind of got bored with it because it was a very strange role to be working. So I mean, I loved games, but I hadn't been employed to make games. So it was a bit strange. It was like working in a sweet shop, but not being able to touch any of the sweets.
Oh yeah, no, totally. I can imagine, like kind of as a kid, 20 years ago or so, people would say, "Oh, you want to play games for a living? You got to be like a video game tester," and like that's nowhere near as fun. And nowadays, you can actually play games the way you want to play games and do it as your career, which is kind of crazy, at least for the time being. So I can kind of get you'd have that kind of like tester developer kind of thing where you're not actually really playing the game, I guess, so to speak. But a lot of people were curious. Obviously, your background is in biology, is it?
Yeah. Biochemistry.
So like yeah. So how did that? How did you happen upon Rare and becoming a video game developer?
It was I went into science. I did a degree in science. I did a PhD in science. I'd always kind of played games. For my generation, I was born in '67, so in the '80s was kind of my teenage years. And in the UK, the really big machines for home computing were a thing called the ZX Spectrum, and then Commodore 64, I guess Amiga, and we had a Spectrum. My brother and I used to play. We used to play games which you loaded off cassette tape, and then some friends had things like Atari 2600 consoles and things. So I'd always played games, and then my kind of research work in biochemistry actually ended up being quite computer based, because we used to work. What we did was called structure determination. So we would work out 3D structures of big biological molecules, but the way that you looked at them was to look at them on 3D graphics packages. So I ended up being quite familiar with a number of those packages, and also looking after the machines that they used to render them. And at the time, silicon graphics machines were kind of like the state of the art. So I actually had quite a lot of experience of working with silicon graphics machines. And the Nintendo 64 was built by Silicon Graphics. So there was bizarrely a demand for people who knew how to work these machines, and that's how I ended up working at Rare.
I mean, that makes a ton of sense when you explain like that. Like, yeah, that's crazy how that happens upon. Like, I mean, I think a lot of people who certainly play video games are like, oh yeah, it's the console's it, but of course there's even like a machine behind the machine, and it's also used for all these other purposes. That's really crazy. That's a cool story.
Yeah, well, at that time, so there wasn't. I don't know how much you can remember about at that time. So the kind of like in the early '90s, you couldn't. Home computers didn't have 3D capabilities. So it was the kind of time when people had like 486 machines, Windows 3 and stuff, and they would buy fancy graphics cards like Voodoo 3DFX and stuff. So that was what the PC. So the PC gamers were getting into that stuff, kind of into like Quake and early stuff like that. And then it was the same time that all of the consoles, when the console stepped from Mega Drive and Super Nintendo, that the next console iteration after that were all 3D. So Sega Saturn, the Nintendo 64.
Yeah, PlayStation.
And then PlayStation. Yeah, so it was kind of like it was an interesting time, because it was a bit of a kind of, I don't know, it was just massively disruptive to the industry, because you had loads of people. I hadn't been in the industry, but you had loads of people in the industry, and they all understood completely how to make 2D games. And then, basically, the AAA content was going to be 3D from then on, and nobody really understood the rules for making 3D. So, the rules about how cameras behaved in games and stuff. So if you look back at a lot of that stuff, you can see that, particularly third-person games, the cameras are incredibly variable in how they behave. People tried a lot of stuff. And then also, say, GoldenEye, one of the things about GoldenEye that has not stood up well is that it was completely built around the N64 controller, which only has one analog stick. So, if you, I've got it out and showed it to my kids and stuff and things, and they can't cope with the fact that the controller is a little bit unusual.
Okay, that's like really funny, because now, again, I don't know how much you necessarily follow like the speedrunning community in GoldenEye, or like how much you know about all the technical stuff.
I got interested in it when I kind of stumbled upon your stuff, and I kind of like skipped around and watched the old video and read some stuff. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay, no, because the hilarious thing is now, and people want to know, is like, why did you guys put in the control styles with two controllers, 2.1 and 2.4? Because ironically now, I guess it was known, very soon after the game was released, that the actions on the second controller weren't like, you could perform those actions during the cutscenes in and out of the levels, right?
Yeah.
And the effect it has is that you can switch weapons, you can shoot, for example, by using the second controller, but you can't move Bond's position, but you can do the action of like starting to run and move. So you actually build his full speed, and you can start the level at full speed, which saves a third of a second.
Yeah.
So now that the game's so optimized, like people are trying to learn how to play it with the two controllers and two analog sticks. And so like why did you? How come that was put in? Even back then you must have known.
Well, so the reason that happened is, so when we were making. So when you're making the game, making the control system for the game, it was, the analog, that controller was the first controller that had any kind of analog input, a console controller. So that was really exciting, obviously, because it enabled a lot of stuff, a lot of fine control that you didn't have. Although the precision on the controllers is really, really bad. They're not great analog sticks. But we had the problem with a first-person game is that there are four axes that you want to control. You want to control the look up and down, and the turn left and right, and move forward back. Well, I'm just gonna check that phone call.
Oh yeah, go right ahead, absolutely.
So there are four things that you would like to have analog control over. That you're turning you're turning left and right, and you're moving backwards and forwards, and the camera pitch and rotation of the camera.
Yes.
The movement forward, backwards, straight left and right, and the camera. Yeah.
Yes.
And on a modern FPS, those two things are controlled. They're split across the sticks. So your left stick is move forwards, backwards, and strafe, and your right stick is camera.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on GoldenEye, on the N64 controller, there's only one analog stick. So you can only have two of those things under analog control, two of those axes under analog control. And then you've got to make the compromise of using the D-pad to move around. For the other thing. However, what we found was, and this kind of came back from, one of the things you can do, and so if you look at some of the 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 controls on it, is that you can have. You're probably very familiar with this. You can have your move forwards and backwards and your strafe on the D-pad, and then use the analog stick to look around, or you can do it the other way around if you want.
Mm-hmm.
The default control makes this seemingly strange decision of having the turn on the analog stick has turn, but then instead of having look up and down, it has move forwards, backwards.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So the reason that was done is that there wasn't really any history of putting first-person shooters on consoles, and there certainly wasn't any history of doing it with that controller. So there was a lot of nervousness about how playable the game would be. So the idea was, could you make it so that you could play the game in its simplest difficulty with just using the thumbstick to move around and the fire button on the bottom. So if you put it into easy, and you can pretty much go around and get through the game because you don't ever need to strafe, because you're driving them like a tank. You kind of like moving forwards and backwards and rotate. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we like sometimes when we get bored of like a normal player mode or normal speed mode, we come up with silly side leagues, and there certainly has been a time where we've had the no strafing league, like only using the analog stick. So right. Yes,
and also there was feedback from Japan, from NCL, so that's Nintendo HQ in Japan, and they were really nervous about the whole idea of a first-person shooter at all, because there was no established market for first-person shooters in Japan. So basically, even Doom, people just didn't play it. It was a really small-time thing as far as they were concerned. And it was kind of considered that the whole, when you play a first-person shooter, I mean, if you're playing it and you're not speedrunning it, often you get into these kind of circle strafing standoffs. You're trying to dodge, but you've got to. But that technique, that circle strafing technique, and also, for instance, if you come up to a corner, and you're wanting to come round the corner with your gun facing in the right direction, the way to do it is to kind of circle strafe the corner, because you walk up to the corner and you start turning, and as you're turning toward the wall, you start strafing, so you slide out as opposed to going out and having to turn afterwards.
Yep.
Nintendo were really, they were really, it's kind of like, well, people aren't going to know how to do that. They're going to get killed all the time. They're going to find it really frustrating. So so basically the compromise was that play the game with the default setup being that the analog stick would be the driving stick for moving Bond around, and you wouldn't need to use anything else.
No, I mean, I can totally see how that works.
Yeah.
And
then we were so frustrated. So the thing is, you'd be doing it, and you'd be going, you know what, this is really annoying, because it would be great if you had two analog sticks.
Sure.
So we were very mindful of the fact that we could have made a better control system with two analog sticks. So kind of fairly late on in the development, we put it in so that you could have, if you plugged in two controllers, you could use both the analog sticks. And that's why there are all those 2.1, 2.2 control systems. And we tried to cover all of the options, but they never received a lot of testing, which is probably why all of the bugs, well, I would call bugs, the things you're referring to as features where you can start running things when the cutscene's on, or you can get up to speed, certainly. That happens because we probably, in testing, nobody checked for those things.
No, I mean, that's definitely like the impression we always got, for sure. And I mean, certainly, like, speedrunners, I'm sure there's a huge difference between the way developers look at these bugs and the speedrunners like love them because they're cool things to discover that help you out. But yeah, that's really cool. Now,
an interesting thing about testing, I mean, GoldenEye had, one of the reasons that the game has stood up so well and why it was so, why it was a good game, is that we had absolutely fantastic QA and testing, particularly from, in-house at Rare, there were probably about, I don't know, half a dozen people doing the testing in-house, plus everyone would help out every now and again. But Nintendo of America had a kind of department called Treehouse, which was their kind of testing department, and they were fantastic. When we were, I mean, particularly for me, because I did pretty much all of the single player setup, so I would always be getting feedback back from them. So they, interestingly, one of the things that testers would do would be that they would always try to run through the setup. So, you know, you'd have a setup for a level, and I'd have an idea about the pace that I wanted people to play it. But obviously, if the level is spawning characters and doing various things, the danger always is that a player who is very proficient can just run through the setup and get past things which are supposed to be challenging. So, you know, that was always a thing on testing's kind of list of things to do. They would effectively try to speed run the levels to break them. So, but obviously they didn't have, you know, you guys have had 20 years time to speed run the levels. So
of course.
You found all of the bugs and kind of like cheats that they weren't able to find, which I think is really interesting.
Well, sure. Or sometimes there is still a really good obstacle, and we just, you know, ram our heads through it 1,000 times until one time it works.
I mean, one thing I've seen which really interested me, because I remember that it was a thing that was tested for bugs, and in the destroyer level, you guys kind of glitched through that little place where there's the vertical pipe.
Yes, that we call it the pipe warp.
Yeah, but you guys can clearly do it almost consistently. You just go up and get to it.
Yeah.
That will have been something that people will spend ages hammering against, because it's an obvious place in the graphics where there might be some kind of problem with the hits. And I'm sure at one point it was actually reduced in size. So probably, you know, it was built, and then probably people could manage to get through it, and we had to change the size, but we didn't make it narrow enough.
Yeah, no, and that one's funny because on Secret and Double O Agent, like the record route goes through that that pipe, and the funny thing is there are theoretical routes through the frigate where you can actually go through it both ways. We only come like up the stairs and go through it.
Okay.
You can do it. You can do it the reverse way, but it's a lot tighter. It's a lot more difficult that way, and so it's not consistent enough to like to pull off. Like even like there are some things that we know of that are like not. You just can't feasibly do them all the time. And like we would do it by switching weapons, which creates lag, and you can squeeze through the cracks sometimes.
That's it's funny. So the whole clipping thing, your clipping question. It's funny. Yesterday evening, I phoned up Martin Hollis just to check what he thought about some of those questions as well.
Cool.
So it's because Martin was team leader, but Martin also his responsibility in the code was all of the movement code. So all of the movement and kind of hits code for Bond, well, for the other characters as well, but predominantly for the player, was written by him. And we had, because your question was, how come in GoldenEye you can find clipping bugs, but there don't seem to be very many of them, certainly compared to most games.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's two reasons for that. One of them is that it's just a testing reason. So when the N64 was coming out, Nintendo used to have, or certainly they still have. I mean, all console first parties kind of have a set of almost kind of technical requirements, which are kind of rules about how consistent and good a product is. So, for instance, there used to be some rules on the Super Nintendo about that the frame rate wouldn't be allowed to drop below certain levels.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be that you'd have the game would be trying to run it natively maybe at 50 frames per second on a NTSC thing, and there'd be some rule that, well, you can run at 50 or you can drop to 25, but you must not drop lower than that. And that would
yes.
be if they could detect frame rate was dropping, that would be a bug, and it would be a bug where you'd have to fix it or else you wouldn't get approval. So it's a kind of lot check is one of the phrases that they used to use, or technical requirements list or something. So And another thing on, particularly on kind of 2D games, was that they just didn't like graphical artifacts. So graphical artifacts where sprites would get corrupted or clipped through the camera in some way. In the move to 3D, Nintendo, when you make a 3D game with a camera that the player can move through the world, suddenly the possibilities of creating nasty graphical artifacts just go through the roof, because if the camera is intersecting geometry in any way, you get these horrible clipping things happening. And Nintendo really, really didn't want to see that in the early N64 games. So there was a lot of pressure to make sure that all of those bugs where clipping happened were eradicated. So I know that in GoldenEye, we used to get bugs back, which were, if they could find anywhere where they could get out of a level or cause the camera to intersect the geometry, it basically was a Class A bug. So one of the reasons there aren't very many is that there was probably a bigger effort than you would get nowadays to get rid of them. For instance, most of the levels in GoldenEye are built on a grid. If you look at the geometry, there's lots of kind of right angle geometry and things. So that kind of stuff is generally fairly safe in terms of creating problems with movement and clipping and things. One of the levels which we used to have a lot of problems was the Statue Park level, because it's completely built off the grid, so it's very organic. The ground undulates around. There's lots of irregular objects sticking out.
Yep.
And I remember that was almost completely remodeled to get rid of clipping problems. The other thing so I think one thing is that the testing was actually quite aggressive about finding them. The other thing is that the way the movement is done in GoldenEye is it's not really done in 3D. There's the 3D geometry that you see, but all of we had a name for it. It was called stands, STAN, like Stan Laurel, which was short for stand, as in the places where Bond could. So the stands in the game were all of the places where Bond could stand, and it's all done kind of as a 2D mesh.
Okay.
So you can see artifacts that arise from it, because the reason for doing it that way, and generally a lot of the stuff. The other thing is that the visibility tests that the game does for Bond for NPCs seeing Bond are generally done on the stands. So there's a thing in the game which people they kind of often interpret it as being some kind of subtle AI thing going on. If you go and find say on the dam, for instance,
yeah.
If you go along the dam and find a character who is patrolling, so the guys who are kind of like doing the circular patrols on the top of the little towers on the dam, they can't see you. They can only see you if they can draw a line to you that they could walk along. So if you go up to there, they can't see you unless you stand at the bottom of the ladder. Because if you're standing at the bottom of the ladder, they know that they can move. They do a line test, which is a move test, to see if they can move down to where you are, and then they see you. But the impression that creates for people playing it is that they think they're being sneaky, because they go along there and they think, because they're trying to not be seen.
Oh, of course.
But they actually can't be seen. But the player interprets that as being, well, the guy hasn't seen me, but that must be because I'm being sneaky.
I see. Yeah.
So it kind of, yeah.
They think they're doing it right. No, I get it. That's cool. No,
and then also with the stand, you said about the thing about when you go into the watch and start flicking through the weapon. So I was talking to Martin about this last night, and he said there's a really good example of it where he'd seen a video where someone in the Aztec level used getting the watch. They'd be pushing against or about to push against a very large vertical jump, and they put the watch on, and then flip to the rocket launcher, and then unpause the watch, and they've suddenly leapt up in the air.
Yeah, okay. I know. I think I know what you're talking about in Aztec. Like, we call it, like, I don't know, the wall warp, the pit warp.
Yeah.
And like, you don't have to pause necessarily. You can just switch a weapon and get up there.
So that happens because in GoldenEye, all of the ROM is actually quite small. The ROM is only like 10 megs or something. So all of the data for all of the geometry and basically everything is compressed on the ROM, right? So that when you flick to, say, a weapon which has not been loaded, or like the rocket launcher, when you go there, when you flick to that, it has to load the model.
Oh.
Yeah. So, but in order to load the model, it has to take the compressed version of the model off the ROM, transfer it into main memory, and uncompress it. And that can lose you several hundred milliseconds.
Well, okay, so definitely, because like, we've done tests where, you know, you run up and down the dam 20 times or whatever, and then you jump off.
Yeah.
And we've done tests, like, while holding a variety of weapons. Like, is holding the rocket launcher going to cause more lag than holding the PP7? And obviously it doesn't. But if you are constantly cycling the weapons, then you lose time. And so it's like, you know, obviously we try to, like, not cycle weapons unnecessarily on runs. I know the other thing that kind of clicked when you said that is that when we do the clips, we call them warps. When we do those, oftentimes, like, certain times, certain switches to weapons will work, and certain ones won't. Like, in the frigate level, that pipe warp, if you try to switch to, like, the PP7 or the Phantom, it almost never works. But if you switch to unarmed, like, it is what you're talking about, the I don't know, the render of the memory.
So the PP7 model, yeah, is probably quite a simple model.
Mm-hmm.
It's, you know, it's just the barrel of the gun and not much more. I think that when you switch to unarmed, it will load the hand model.
Oh.
Yeah. Which is probably a complicated model. So, because I know, actually, and yeah, it's interesting that because the PP7, PPK as it was right until the last minute, we changed the name.
Sure, yeah.
Because that gun model was the it's pretty much the default model. So you would have it all the time when we were testing and building the game. That was always the gun that you had.
Yeah.
The gun. And even though that has got a hand on the back of it, that the part of the hand that you can see in there was a lot of effort was put into refining it and to making it very, very low poly. Whereas the hand that you see when you get the slapper's hand, the unarmed hand, I bet you that was kind of fairly late in the day. I think it was really actually quite late in the day that we decided to allow you to have that hat, I mean, with the kind of lame karate chop.
Sure, yeah.
So that was, that was something that went in fairly late in the game's development. So, and the hand model that's being used will just be the hand model that was available, and it's probably quite high poly, relatively high poly. I think Martin cited the rocket launcher as being a good example, because the rocket launcher is, again, because it's quite a big thing sticking into the screen, it's drawing quite a lot of geometry. So it's and it's got extra there's some textures for the labeling on it and stuff and things. So the thing that happens when you get those glitches, when you drop some frames, if you think about it, what's happening in the game is it's got a low level, what we call the game tick, which is trying to always run at the same speed. So But the game tech is just desperately trying to run at the same speed. I think on GoldenEye it's probably trying to tick at 30. Well, okay, on the NTSC one, it'll tick at 25 frames per second, I think, because the speed's different.
Is it not the opposite? NTSC is the 30 and PAL.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're 30. That's right. Yeah, you're 30. So you're right. So it's probably running at 30. Ideally, it would run at 60 because that's as fast as we could probably go.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't doing that. It's probably running at 30. I can't remember.
No, I think from what we know, that's right too. Like, if the guys have emulated versions of the game, it can do the full 60. But on the N64, it does 30 on NTSC or 25 on PAL.
So the tick's running at 30. What happens is if you cause, then the tick's running at 30, but the graphics, the frame rate for the rendering is all over the place. Yeah.
Yes.
So
yes.
The frame rate and the rendering, we probably, it could render at 60, and I know that when we used to preview geometry and stuff and things, we would sometimes have it running at 60 in dev. But I think realistically, it only ever runs at 30.
On the
console, yeah.
From what we understand, yeah.
Yeah. And then the frame rates that you can have are all, they're all kind of integer values of the 60. So 60 is the best you can do, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
If you can't get consistently hammer out render frames at 60, then you probably end up taking 2 steps of 60 to get the next frame out. So that's why it drops to 30, yeah?
Okay.
And then if it takes you 3 60ths to get the next frame out, you drop to 20. If it takes you 4 60ths, you drop to 15. And if it takes you 5, you drop to 12. So that's where the frame rate drops go the way they go.
Okay.
Yeah, so it goes 30, 20, 15, 12, 10, because if it takes you 6 60ths to get the next frame out, you drop to 10.
Yep.
And then whatever 7 is, 7's going to be some really funny number. It's like 8.25.
Yeah.
So it just drops down like that. The part of the game which is trying to tick at 30, the thing that's handling all of the game logic, if you cause the frame rate to drop, that has to deal with awkward questions like, okay, I know Bond's moving at, I don't know, 3 meters per second or whatever, or say he's moving at, I don't know, some distance every 6/30th of a second.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do the hit tests on the ground or the hit test against the geometry, you know where you are, and then you try to draw a line to where you think you're going to go based on the speed you're moving, and then you see if it hits anything. And if it hits something, then you don't go there. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. If you've got to cope with the thing where you've dropped about 3, we call it dropping a frame when you've not been able to run it the frame rate you're at. If you've dropped a whole bunch of frames, then you're left with the question, well, I know I'm moving at this speed, but I know I've dropped like 4 or 5 frames, so I need to test 4 or 5 times further away. So it's kind of like it gets it as you start dropping frames, the hit testing starts to get a bit approximated. And that's why you can get away with your clipping thing.
Okay.
So you go up to those pipes in the frigate, and if you try to push through those pipes and it's running at a good frame rate, then you won't be able to push through them. Because the test that it's doing, it's testing very small pushes. If you think about those pipes, there's probably a bit where 2 convex curved things come together.
Mm-hmm.
2 cylinders, yeah?
Yep.
If you're testing to move through them, if you test trying to move Bond, so Bond himself has got a kind of circle perimeter. If you try to slide that circle through, it'll get jammed, yeah?
Yes.
It's almost like it's like imagine you had like three coins, 2 coins held on the table, and you try to push a 3rd coin through.
Yes.
Yeah? Yep. It'll get stuck because there'll be a point where the radiuses of all the coins clash with each other. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm imagining it. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you were to look at that, and so if you're trying to push it through continuously on the ground, you'll be moving the coin that you're pushing through very small amounts every time. Yeah.
Yep.
So you come to a point where it's saying, no, there's a position here where it's going to overlap, so it can't go through. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But if you imagine doing the same thing, where you're just checking the positions where you've, say, moved the coin, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch each time, you might be you bring it right up to it's nearly touching, and then you check their position 1/4 of an inch away, and that's okay because you're through and you're on the other side.
Yeah, no, I that totally makes sense. And I mean, so when you were explaining that, something clicked to me, because the past couple of weeks I've been playing the silo level, which is a level where you drop a lot of frames because there's so many guards in such a confined area. And what I was getting frustrated with is that oftentimes I'll be like running through, there's hallways in the level, I'll run through the middle of the hallway, or not quite, necessarily straight in the middle, maybe slightly at an angle, and it feels like I'll get stuck on a wall, which is like the entire hallway away. But what's kind of making sense is because I'm probably dropped to 12 or 15 frames per second, it's like approximating, it just gets a little bit messier in terms of where the game thinks your position is.
Yeah, because it can't, it doesn't have enough, it has to, when you do that line test for the movement, it has to do the line test then, it has to return a value, so it does the best it can, and you have various approximations, but obviously once your approximation gets very grainy, then bad things start to happen. I think the other thing, because it's like, one of the things that's interesting about it is it's almost impossible to get outside the background, isn't it? I've seen some videos where people have done it where they're messing around with doors,
mm-hmm.
and sometimes the door knocks them out of the background.
Oh yeah. So like I'm kind of thinking like out of bounds, like you're kind of out of the. Yeah.
You get that weird thing in GoldenEye because what's happened is the way GoldenEye decides what geometry it's going to draw in the world is using what we call portals. So almost in a corridor-based situation, almost every corridor door threshold has got what we call a portal associated with it.
Oh, okay.
So whenever you do get outside the background, then you get that really strange thing where you're almost like looking through weird sliding rectangles.
Yes.
Yeah, those are the portals. So normally, and that's the way the game renders what it's drawing, what it needs to show you. But if it thinks you're in the wrong place, and then renders through the portals, you get this skewed view. And also the portals are what we call screen aligned. So the portals only draw kind of rectangles which line up with the top and the bottom of the screen and the sides of the screen. So when you see those if you're outside the background, the portals they just behave in a strange way. As you rotate around them, they don't rotate like 3D. They kind of you see a projection in 2D moving about.
Okay, that kind of confirms what there's one guy who looks really a lot into the code on emulators and stuff. His name's Henrik, and this guy, when we first discovered the first ever Out of Bounds, it was on the train level, and he kind of looked into it, and he realized, because he was able to replicate it on an emulator somehow, that he discovered those kind of portals, and he realized, like, if you can clip out of one train car, you can't clip back into the next.
It's really, that's the thing. It's like it's so hard to get out that you have the same problem getting back in.
Oh.
It's like if you're outside. I remember it's funny. One game I remember seeing it in. I remember playing the first time I played Journey. I managed to somehow get out of the background. Some dodgy hit, and it was really frustrating because I didn't want to have to replay the level. I was like trying to remember where I'd come out.
Oh yeah, definitely. I see.
Yeah, but it's the way the hits tend to work is it always, if you can imagine what it's doing is it always assumes that where you are is a valid position, and then checks to see if where you're going to go is going through anything you shouldn't go through. So
okay.
once you're outside, your chances of getting back in are minimal because you have to be in exactly the right place.
I see.
Be where you came out, but you need to find another place where you can. I'm just going to shut a door. I've got something on that.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, no sweat. I deal with the same stuff a lot of the time, right? So that's actually kind of what led me to have more overnight hours when I do my streams and whatnot.
Yeah. So here's an interesting. Do your guys have they? I'm just going to look at your question because there was another thing.
Well, I was kind of wondering. Yeah, no.
Shoot away. If you've got other questions, go for it.
Yeah. So no. Well, what I was going to say is like. So I mean, I take it you've seen the video made about the mysterious things in GoldenEye because that's shortly. So in that video there's 2 places where we have that out of bounds clip. Since then, a third one was discovered on the streets level, and this one actually people were able to replicate a number of times, and we always thought that like if there was one level where getting out of the bounds would actually work, it would be streets because it's kind of a maze-like level. The ending has like a big deloading zone to get out, so you can just warp out of bounds and then just run directly there. And it turned out that didn't work because you can't access the despawn zone when you're out of bounds. Now, I guess the theory is if you could find a location out of bounds to clip back in near the very end, that could have a chance of success.
Has anyone ever come out and got back in again?
No, not in 20 years, and we've only gotten out a handful of times.
It may not actually be possible.
Sure.
Just because, just thinking the way that it worked. I mean, Martin would know more because he wrote the code. I mean, the problem also is that we don't have any access to the code.
Okay.
So I mean, I guess they still have the code at Rare because they must have used it when they made their Xbox version, which they never released.
Yes. Interesting. So they would potentially still have it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and there are likely having the code you might be able to work some things out. But I mean I think that idea of being able to get out of the level and get back in again, it's not because isn't there some stuff in Super Mario or in Mario 64 where they do that where the game you can confuse the game as to where you are and then you end up playing it blind. Is that right?
Well, I mean, I was going to say the even better example is in like Majora's Mask or Ocarina of Time. Is like you can go into I think, for example, the underground locations in that game are all mapped together. So you can go in one, get out of bounds, find the loading zone of somewhere else, and now you're across the entire world. But no, Super Mario, you can definitely, there's a lot of like out of bounds clips. Like the thing is, in these other games, and I was wondering when you talked about how the camera's different in GoldenEye, if that also has something to do with it. But it's like these clips can be useful in terms of speedrunning, whereas in GoldenEye, they're not, and they're so much more rare to encounter.
Well, I mean, it's the first-person thing because the camera is where you are. In all the other games, in the third-person game, the camera is not where you are. The camera is a position which is calculated relative to where you are. So that's why there's more possibility for things being wrong. Yeah,
I see. Yeah. Cool.
If you can cause the camera to go out of bounds, then that could be helpful. Or I guess, or the camera can stay in bounds and your position could be out of bounds. That's another thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then it can get confused and so on and so forth. No, definitely. Yeah, and now the other thing you said with the statue level is like now that you've told me it's kind of the one that you guys had more trouble with. Now I'm going to tell everyone to go look and see if we can find any useful clips on statue.
Well, so the classic problem you get with polygonal geometry is what we call a T-junction. So if you imagine that the mesh that makes up all polygonal geometry is made up of triangles. It's a triangular mesh. All of the vertices, for each triangle, the 3 vertices of the triangle, if the mesh is a good mesh, then those vertices have to be in exactly the same place as the vertices of the next triangle that's joining on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yep.
If they're not quite in the same place, even by a very tiny amount, then it creates what you call a T-junction. So a T-junction is like, if you imagine a T, it's like you've got tiles coming together, and instead of making all these neat junctions where all the points, all the lines join at a point, you now have a point that hits a line and creates a T.
Okay.
And the issue there is that around that vertex, you don't, a lot of the calculations that you use for moving along the mesh and stuff and things, they become error prone if you've got any T-junctions. So if you're building a kind of grid thing, it's generally quite, when you're building it, people don't tend to accidentally make T-junctions. Certainly, I mean, modern graphics packages are very good at stopping you from doing it anyway. Modern games use enormous amounts of geometry, and there are a lot of automated processes for generating that geometry. So if you're making a big curve or a cylinder or something, then you don't have to go and by hand make all of those points. When we were making GoldenEye, it was made with fairly simple modeling software. So pretty much the artist who was building the background was responsible for the positions of nearly every polygon that they put in the game. So it was possible, if you just through randomness as you're moving your mouse around, if you didn't force things to be exactly in the same place, points to be in the same place, they could be slightly off and you wouldn't notice. And I know in Statue Park that was an absolute nightmare because the level was built and then we had to go back and completely remodel. I think actually Statue Park, the way that a lot of the game worked when we were converting the backgrounds to put them into the game is that it would take the artist's model, and on the model the artist had flagged up the floor, which was going to become the stands, so that the game knew it would have the part that it was going to render, and then it would have the other part which it used for doing the hits. But for most of the levels, those two sets of data were sucked off the same geometry, whereas I think in Statue Park there may well be a separate file which was the stands for it, because there were so many problems with the stands that were coming out of the model.
Cool. No, I think I kind of get the. I mean, it's kind of like old new terminology for me. I think I get how it's described.
Oh, have you used? I mean, there's an absolutely amazing editor, which is the it's called GoldenEye editor. It's got the GoldenEye Vault or something is the place the link to it.
There's this new one that a couple guys have been using. It's like an emulator, but it also shows like the overhead map of the level, like as kind of an overlay.
Well, so in the last week, those guys, I tweeted a little bit about it. The guys who make that editor, the GoldenEye Vault editor, the GoldenEye Setup editor, have released their ROM mod for which basically makes Goldfinger 64.
Yes.
Right. So, but that editor is really I mean, it's weird because it kind of allows you to access a lot of the things that we had access to when we were building the game, but it's because it was built afterwards. It's its own thing. But if you look at that, you can see things. So, for instance, you asked me if there was some way to subvert Natalya's hacking thing in Tron. Yeah. So your question is that coded directly to the internal timer in the game? Okay. So I was able to go and look on the GoldenEye setup editor, and I can find. I mean, it's not written in a very legible way, but I can pull out the logic that governs that objective, and I can see that it's completely tied to a timer.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
and in fact, I grabbed a screen grab of it, which I'm just going to forward to you.
sure.
If you.
You know, I mean, now that I see this editor, I just like it definitely is the one that this guy Henrik and the other, like, we call them, yeah, we call them tool-assisted speedrunners because this is like a tool they're using to, you know, and no, I'm pretty sure that's, or what you're describing. Henrik found the same thing when he was studying the control objective, and that's what he determined.
Okay, I've just forwarded you. It's a small PNG file, which you should be able to just open.
Okay.
So what's quite interesting, the guy who wrote this editor, I think his handle is Subdrag.
Yeah.
It's an absolutely amazing piece of work, because what he managed to do is to, because all of the setup in GoldenEye, in the single player stuff, is basically written as a bunch of scripts in this kind of made up programming language, which Mark Edmonds made up. So Mark and I would decide what I wanted to try and do, or I would try and build things, and maybe there was some feature missing. Like, I don't know, maybe I'd be able want a character to be able to aim at something that wasn't Bond or whatever. So, for instance, here's a good example. When we set up the gas plant, all of the stuff that happens in game at the end of that level, with Oromov and the guys all lining up and pointing guns at Trevelyan and stuff and things, yeah?
Yep.
When we had no plan for how we were going to make that work. So when we decided we needed to have it in the game, we had to be able to get characters to do things which weren't already programmed. So if you imagine it, when you set up the game, when you set up the AI is all. We used to say that the AI was kind of player centric. So the AI was always trying to interact directly with Bond.
Yeah.
So trying to shoot at him, or point a gun at him, or look at him, or do whatever. Yeah.
Like you were describing with the dam patrolling guards.
Yeah. But if you want to have some kind of in-game cutscene where Oromov is pointing a gun at Trevelyan, you need to have some extra code to make that work.
Yeah.
Because you didn't have, so all of those things were built up from little bits of script. So all of the, in the GoldenEye setup editor, if you edit the setup files for each level, you can see all of the scripts for all of the characters in the levels. A lot of them are the same script. So, you know, a lot of the guards in the game just behave in exactly the same way. But if you've got an important NPC, they tend to have special scripts for them. So that picture that I've just sent you, can you see it?
Yeah, no, I see it here now. It's a lot of stuff that I don't,
Okay.
Of course.
It's written in crazy, unreadable language.
Okay.
Because what's happened is that the way it looks there is not the way I wrote the thing that's in the window there. I wrote that 20 years ago.
Sure.
I didn't write it in that format. It's been pulled out, and it's got a structure similar to the structure that I wrote. But if you look at it, basically, it's got. If you look at the bit in the main window, it's just part of the script, and it's the part of the script where Natalya is hacking the terminal in the control room, and all the guards are being spawned.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you look at it, it's got the display text. It's got the list of things she says. You know, she says the yaw oscillation is above 5 degrees.
Yes.
And then the bit after that, it's got resume if return blah blah blah, and then it's just if cycle counter is greater than value, return loop something. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the counter. So she says that, and then it waits for a certain amount of time before it does the next thing, which is she says, "Do you think you could be a bit quieter?"
Yes.
And then it goes into this other thing where it cycles backwards and forwards, and then it gets the thing, and then it stays pretty steady. But if you look to the next one down there, there's a bit that's in green.
Yes.
And that's got resume if return. So basically what happens is it's almost like everything in the game is running its own little script, right?
Yeah.
So every guard in the game and every door in the game and every whatever in the game has got a little script that it's running, and every game tick, every 30th of a second, each of those little scripts gets to do something. So it's like the thinking, it's called a thread. The thinking that the game is doing just gets passed around between all of them, and they get to do one thing, and then or get to do a little bit, and then they hand the control back. So that in this is like Natalya's doing. She's saying this, and then hands control back to the tick, to the game, and then a 30th of a second it comes back round to her and says, "Well, what do you want to do now?" And she says, "Well, I'm just waiting for this counter." So it goes away again, and then you get down to that one bottom where it says, below that green writing, yeah.
Yep.
Resume if return value loop met. If cycle counter greater than value, this is the final counter on it. Then she says, "I've did it. The satellite orbit is decaying." And then the next thing she does immediately is set objective bits, if true, objective 2. So when that timer gets to a certain value, she displays that text and she sets that objective to be completed.
Yeah, no, I definitely follow what's going on in the script now, yeah.
But that is the part that decides whether that objective is done. So killing the guards or doing other things won't make that go any faster.
Yes.
It's just she's just sitting there watching an alarm clock.
Yeah, wow. And how do I was just wondering, like, what the if cycle counter, is bigger than the value, then it goes on to the next thing, of course. And it checks for that value every 30th of a second.
Yeah, well, it's what we call, it's like a thread. So if you think about it, in the game, all of the AI entities in the game are wanting to do some, they need to make decisions. They need to decide what they're going to do next based on what they know about the world at the time. Okay, here's a good analogy. You know that kind of in classic mythology, there's I think is it Perseus or somebody goes to see some witches, and they've only got one eye between three of them.
Okay.
And they just pass the eye around. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of the same thing. All of the AI in the game has got one eye or one thinking ability.
Sure.
But no, everyone can't be using it at once, so they have to take turns.
Okay.
Yeah. So and what happens in the game is every tick of the game, every third of the second, everyone gets to have a turn thinking.
During every 1/30th? Yeah. So it's like if there's 4 guards, it's not like 1/30th, one guard gets to see the second 30th, the second guard. They're all getting in the same 1/30th.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's kind of, I think it's frame rate dependent. So it's like, because while it's doing that thinking, the whole game can't do anything else. It's kind of waiting for it to be finished.
Okay.
It's called a thread. In computer programming, it's a thread. So the thread gets passed through all of the different AIs. So when I was making it, a classic thing when you're setting up the scripts, if you make a stupid bug in the script where the thread doesn't get passed back, the game just freezes.
Okay.
Because it's waiting for something to happen. It's like, because this is pertinent to something else. Because I think, your other point about looking at the ground.
Yes.
Looking at the ground seems to make things happen better sometimes.
Yeah.
Or faster, yeah? So I think what's happening there, in theory, looking at the ground shouldn't make any difference, because the game is running a simulation of the world, and then it decides what it's going to draw. What it's drawing shouldn't affect the simulation of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? One thing that is problematic for that is that if you imagine when you have a level set up and it has all the characters in their positions in the level all ready to go before you start going through it, yeah? Yeah. Like, there are guards in various positions, guarding rooms there.
Yeah.
Got a position and they're facing in a certain direction. And all they're doing is they're waiting to be ready. They're waiting for the conditions to be right for them to move or interact with a player in some way.
Yep.
So in GoldenEye, and in lots of games, this is not uncommon. It's pretty much the state always. When they're in that, you're trying to not have too much work to do. It's like that game thread, that tick. The more optimized you can make that, the better the game runs. So I think what happens in GoldenEye in the setup, and again, I didn't write the code. The code for this will be written by Mark Edmonds. Before a character is ever drawn in the game, they're kind of in this dormant state where it's almost like they're in kind of deep freeze. So they don't do the things that a character which is active in the game does. They're just waiting until they need to get ready just in time to be drawn or to interact with Bond or something. Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
One of the tests we used to determine whether a character had to get ready was, has the game ever considered whether it has to draw you or not? Because if you think about it, if you're walking around in the world and it's a corridor game, then you don't need to think about drawing somebody until you've started drawing the corridor that they're in.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
If you're wandering around looking horizontally in the world as you normally would be, as you look around, as Bond looks around, then obviously it will be causing it to consider whether it should draw different corridors, through doors and stuff and things. If you look at a door, the game has got to be prepared that the door might open. So it's got to be ready to draw the corridor behind the door.
Yeah, no, I follow.
And all the guards that are in that corridor have got to be ready to be drawn. So you've got to have all of the geometry ready to draw it, because you might need to draw it the next frame. The door might open next frame, yeah?
Yeah, no,
if you're looking at the floor,
yes,
then you're not triggering those things.
Yeah, the game is considering less. No, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and the game is, and it's not that it's having to actually consider less, that it's having to not be so ready.
Yeah,
not
yeah.
to spend time getting ready.
Yeah, no, I follow. It's like it's almost not considering to not consider it yet.
Yeah, that's exactly, that's what it is. Yeah, and I suspect that in some case, and it shouldn't be that influences things, but Mark and I were talking about this last night, and we kind of think, well, maybe that was one of the things that by looking at the floor, you're sometimes causing things to not have to get ready, and that allows the game to run slightly faster, or allows things to not drop frames or whatever. There's another thing that Martin suggested, which I think is interesting, is that the game is always trying to read the controller input from the player. Yeah, it has to sample that controller input as frequently as it can, and ideally, it would be sampling that controller input at the rate that it's trying to tick the world at. So that every time that 1/30th tick that's going on in the background becomes simulation. The optimum response to what the player is doing happens if you are sampling the player's controller input every tick. Yeah?
Yeah.
There's no point in sampling it faster than that, because if you were sampling it at 60, then you just end up throwing half them away, because If you're sampling it at less than that, then you have to make guesses as to what it would be in between. So if you were sampling it at 1/15th of a second, then you're only getting input about what the player wants to do every 2 ticks.
Yeah, no, I totally follow. And the thing is, I think the game must do a pretty good job of sampling at every tick.
Yeah, but I think it breaks down sometimes. I think if you've got really, really laggy stuff going on with the rendering, and the rendering is dropping down to like an 8 frames per second or something, I think that it doesn't. I think when it's rendering, it loses player input. Martin, we're not sure about it. We're thinking this might be a problem. So, and it's trying to, it just tries to interpolate and extrapolate what it thinks the player was trying to do. So it might be, for your point of view, as a speedrunner, if you're looking at the ground and you're keeping a consistently high frame rate, then you get to have more input or more responsive input as to what the game is doing. So you can take better lines and things.
Yep.
Whereas if it's laggy, your input isn't being considered in the same way.
Yeah, no, like what I was going to say is I've never had it happen, and it might just not guess this way. I've never had it like switch a weapon when I didn't switch a weapon, or open a door when I didn't do that, or shoot, right? But we've definitely had it where like you might press shoot, or you might try to switch a weapon and it won't. Like it'll eat that frame, right?
Yeah. Well, that's it. If it's missing button pressing, if you can, that's it. It shouldn't miss a button press.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But if a button press happens in between times when it's sampling, there's no way that it can infer that you press the button.
Yes.
If you're strafing, if you're kind of diagonal strafing, and it misses a couple of frames of input, because you were doing it before and you were doing it after, it'll just it's basically it's assumption. The assumption it has to make if it's missing input is that you're doing what you were doing before. It can't go back. It can only guess what you're doing based on what you were doing before. So if you weren't pressing the fire button before, then you probably haven't pressed the fire button.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you do think that if you were strafing and then it misses the ticks, it might still think you were strafing that whole time.
Yeah. But if you think about if you're going up and you're trying to strafe around a corner and you're making subtle changes to the direction you're pointing the stick every 30th of a second,
mm-hmm.
and the game misses some of them, then you'll take a slightly different route to what the route you would have taken if the control was more responsive.
Yes, definitely.
You'd in fact take a slightly wider route around the corner possibly. You'd spend more time going in the wrong direction.
Of course. No, I follow exactly.
So I think that's what's happening with the so there's two things. So that I think both of those things apply to your looking at the floor. One of them is that maybe there is some issue with the AI not doing exactly the same thing if you're looking at the floor, because some of the characters aren't having to consider whether they're being drawn or not. Yeah?
Yeah.
So the character, that thing about thinking about getting ready, the character doesn't do that in the same way if you're looking at the floor. In fact, some characters might never even consider getting ready. Now, that might cause some very subtle changes to what go on. However, probably the bigger factor is the control responsiveness if you're looking at the floor.
Okay.
You're keeping the frame rate higher. You want the most responsive input to what the speedrunner is doing through the level. And if you're in some situation where it's dropping frames all over the place, then it starts to become less responsive. It shouldn't, but it's missing things because the thing that's monitoring the input is being compromised by the frame rate.
Yeah, no, I see for sure. And like, yeah, because when this whole looking down was first discovered, it really cut about a second off per minute on every level. So it was substantial for sure. But the thing is, on some levels, like on statue, it doesn't do anything because there's like not any guards who would have to consider anything, I guess, right? All right, that's cool. So you kind of think it's more just the overall responsiveness that's having a bigger impact.
I think it's probably a bigger factor in. I would suspect it'd be a bigger factor in some corridor levels where they branch, because there'll be guards which don't ever actually decide whether they need to do anything because they never feel like they're going to be rendered.
Yeah. Okay.
Direction. I mean, you might. I don't know. It'd be really hard. There might be a way of testing it. I mean, looking at the floor is the best thing because obviously, also if the level's got just thinking if the level's got kind of verticality to it, like say the archives, looking at the floor might not be so useful sometimes, because if you're on the second or third floor and you're looking at the floor, you're actually causing it. Oh no, actually the portals are important. The portals, like I said, the kind of thresholds go around doors and things. They're how it decides what it might have to draw. And then the other thing is the kind of being quiet thing. So, say in good examples are the bunker escape, where you start in the cell, and the archives. Obviously, both those levels have got, effectively, they can have infinite number of guards, because whenever you make a noise, so if there's a guard that's off street, and hasn't ever been drawn, if Bond makes a noise through firing a gun that guard would hear, then the guard spawns a copy of himself and sends the copy.
Yeah, okay.
So in the archive, if you stay in the room at the start of the archives, where there's the gun on the table, and you could stay in there and shoot an infinite number of guards, because they'll just keeps on spawning them every time you make a noise.
Yes, and I mean I've done that. I've always thought infinite, but before I was speedrunning the game, when I was 10 years old, I would try to see how many guards I could kill on the level, right? So I would do exactly that, and obviously on some levels, like I guess it's coded to just spawn an infinite number of guards all the time.
Yeah, some of them when the alarm goes off, it just sometimes spawns an infinite number of them, or it just keeps on going.
Yes, but
in the archives, if you've got, so for example, one of the places the guards come from in the archives is, I think there's a room above you somewhere.
Yeah.
And then there's the room immediately across the hall from where you start, which is kind of like the execution room. It's got a kind of shooting.
Yeah.
I suspect that the code for the guys in there is, if you've never been drawn, so that comes back to that kind of thing. If you've never been drawn or considered being drawn, and you hear a noise, you send a copy of yourself. However, if you've been drawn, so if that door has ever been opened to draw that room, and Bond's been looking at it, even if you haven't been on screen, we consider that you've been drawn, and you can't spawn a copy of yourself then, because the bug would be that the bug that would create is that Bond could be looking at you when you spawn the copy.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
So that's the logic.
Sure.
But if you think about it, if you're going around looking about the place, making noise, doing your speed run, all the guys
haven't been drawn they could spawn copies.
They could spawn copies.
I see.
If you're looking at the floor, it's slightly different. So there's a subtlety there about whether looking at the floor might change the number of guards that get spawned in certain situations.
Yeah, no, I see. I mean, the levels that came to mind while talking about this were the archives, because I know I've done it where you just attract an infinite number of guards in the first room. And then in terms of the verticality looking, like a good example is the caverns spiral. If we are looking down when we're strafing up the spiral, it's just so laggy and you lose tons of time because there's tons of guards down there. So you always want to look away from it, and it really improves the frame rate. So I don't know if it can it forget the guards? Because it's not like any more of them are being drawn downstairs.
Okay. No, because that the only, when we were doing the setup for the levels, when I was building the levels, we pretty much, I think the order they were set, Silo and 7IA were they were like the first levels that were ever working.
Okay.
And they were kind of like a test bed. So I mean that's it's interesting from the point of view. So that 7IA with the one with Boris, where you're duplicating the GoldenEye.
Yep.
That's probably the level that had the most testing ever.
Okay.
and even though it's because if you look at it, even though it's a really small level, to my mind, it plays very well. Like the positionings of the guards is really sweet. All the stuff with kind of like sniping out speedrunning is probably different, but all the stuff with kind of like shooting out the cameras and things, it's got a lot going on in a very small space.
No, yeah, it's a beautiful level. I don't know if you've seen the 00 Agent speedrun, but there's a point where Boris, once you talk to him, if you like leave his distance, he'll run away from you.
Yeah.
So obviously that's faster to get him to run away from you perfectly into the mainframe room. But he can sort of run a variety of directions.
Yeah.
And we've kind of found the perfect area to stand and time in which to leave him so that he runs into the mainframe room and you can continue. And then you blow up all the cameras while he's performing his hack. So I mean,
so from the point of view of that GoldenEye editor, if you look at the setup files for that level, because one of the things you can look at in the editor is that you can see how the nav mesh works.
Okay.
So if you look at the editor, it has I can't remember what they're called. They're called. If one of your guys has looked at it, he'll know what they are because you've seen them. There are lots of little squares, which we call pads, and the pads are the way that we built the nav mesh on top of the background. So they were all done manually, and basically a pad is a little square, and it has links to other pads. So when you watch characters running around, the way they move through the world is if they want to. Every character always knows which pad it is closest to. So, if it wants to go somewhere else in the level, it then knows what pad it wants to go to.
Okay.
And because the pads are all linked up, that's how it plans its route. So the route is so basically what you're doing, I imagine, is by standing in a particular place. So Boris will be there, and he'll want to go onto some route that he's decided, which is the route to the mainframe. And depending on where you're standing, it will modify his route slightly. So it'll either be that he's picked his route and he's about to do it, and then he tries to go toward a pad, and you're on it, and he goes, "Oh, okay, I can't go to that one, so I should go to the next one." So he shortens his route or something.
Okay, yeah.
So it's that, but I don't know whether. I think particularly for things where there are objectives where you're dependent on the route that an NPC takes, knowing where the pads are might help you. Although the thing is that you guys have done so much kind of actual research where you're actually in the game messing around with where you're standing when something happens, that you've probably found a lot of these things. I'm trying to think.
Like another example, I mean, the Boris one's good because like what we discovered from there is if you want to alert him, he puts his hands up and then he'll start walking. If you bump into him at all in that process and then go to the position where he might run away, he'll never run to the mainframe room. So you have to be very careful not to touch him at all. Go to the spot we found, and then he has a chance of running to the mainframe room, but not always. The other similar one is Natalya at the end of Control, and through just thousands of runs, we always figure that from when her last speech box disappears, so she completes the objective B, she says two more things like, okay, go on, I'm going back to the lift or whatever.
Yeah.
From the time that disappears, the fastest she can complete objective A, getting back to the lift, is 17 seconds. Right. So we time it so we jump into the edit level 17 seconds after that and hope that it will work out.
You're trying to you're trying to get her to complete that objective while the end cutscene's going.
Yes, exactly. And the thing is, over time we've refined it so that it's almost like if you were to watch a modern Control speedrun, it's like she'll say the message, we're always looking down, and then we run away and we never look back at her, and we're far away off in the level. So it's almost like, I guess she's not unloaded, but maybe she's not considering to be drawn or something.
Okay, right, yeah.
And then, and then,
So if a character, like we were talking about the other stuff, if a character thinks that they might be being drawn, so that will be, in general, that is if the rendering call for what it's going to do on screen is considering drawing the room that you are in, then it's almost like the game's got a whole bunch of kind of cheap ass approximations that it will use if it thinks it can get away with it. Yeah.
Sure.
So like the approximation of, oh, I'm not going to bother going myself. I'll create a copy and send a copy.
Yeah.
For the characters navigating through the world, if they think they're watching them, if they think they might be drawn, then they're a lot more honest about what they do. So they will actually do the thing of running the animation and moving through the world.
Yes.
However, if you're not looking at them, then they just do a kind of cheap calculation where they go, well, I'm on this pad in the nav mesh, and I need to go to that pad in the nav mesh, and I know how far away it is, and I'd probably move at this speed, so I just guess where I'm going to be. So in her case, if you're looking, when she's doing that walk away to get back to live, if the AI thinks that it's being drawn or might be drawn, then it will go through the proper steps to work out what traversal speed she would have, and it would probably plot her course moving through the level. If you're not looking at her and it thinks it can get away with it, it'll just do a cheap calculation based on the pads and the distance between the pads, and that's probably faster.
Well, so this is what's really interesting about Control is that at the end of the level, it's definitely faster, or certainly more consistent, and we can get these 17-second optimal endings very often. And like what we always thought is that it's like, if she's unloaded, that's what we would consider it, and she's just not ready to be drawn. If she's in that state, she's less likely to bump into guards and run circles and whatnot, right? So she can get to the end optimally. But when you first retrieve her and then she runs down the stairs to start hacking, at that point, we found you want to always be watching her move until she's down the stairs. And if you don't watch her move and you have the cheap pathing, oftentimes she can lose time there. So it has the opposite effect when you first retrieve her, for whatever reason.
Okay, and that might, if you think about the way, if a character is doing the full kind of simulation of moving through the world, running information, what it does is when they're following their route from pad to pad, they don't go right the way up to the pad. As you approach a pad, you start looking for the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you did it that they went right to the pad, then they'd look stupid. They'd look very robotic. I mean,
okay, yeah.
They look more robotic than they look at the moment.
They would take a step, stop, take it. I get it. Yeah.
They go right up to something, and then they decide to change direction. So what happens is, as they're approaching one pad, they start looking toward the next one. So it sounds to me like, in the case of her coming down the stairs, going into the control room, if you're watching her, that looking to the next pad probably makes her make a slightly shorter route than the route that she would take notionally if you weren't looking at her, which would be to just look at the distances between all of the pads.
Okay.
If you watch her, she cuts a corner.
Yeah.
And then in the other case, if you watch her, she goes further.
Yeah, no, I totally see what you're saying.
But that's just going to be down to because all the way the pads work. I mean, that was one of my jobs, was to just build the nav meshes, and you particularly in big spaces, you try to get away with as few of them as possible.
Okay.
Because the less of them there are, the less. Yeah. It's that other thing. You must have seen the thing where sometimes you see here you go. You'll see it a lot with, I would say, hostages and things, or characters who are about to run off to somewhere in the level and despawn.
Yep.
Sometimes they go and the first steps they take can often look ridiculous because they'll be standing somewhere and they want to go. They're going to go off out through some door, but they don't go straight toward the door. They run off to somewhere else in the room.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, and that's a consequence of them planning the route, and they get a route which is a list of pads, and they go to the first pad on the route, and the first pad on the route, because of the way the pads are spread out in the room, might not be particularly close to the place where they're going to leave the room.
Yes.
So they go in a big circle, or they just look a bit stupid when they're doing it.
Yeah. No, yeah, one example like that comes to mind is one of the upstairs hostages on Frigate. Like, he can often just run circles. He gets stuck on a stair or a guard, and he runs circles.
Yeah, and that's and also somebody like that. If you look away from him, he'll sort himself out immediately.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So what's happening there is it's running. The way the characters get around in the world is they just play animations. Yeah.
Yep.
And the movement that they get comes out of the animation. So each of those animations, there'll be like an animation which is like run 2 steps forward or something. So if I'm trying to go somewhere, I just play that animation and see where it gets me to, and then I play it again. So if I'm trying to go around a corner to go down some stairs and the door's open, I play the animation to try and get to where I'm going to. The animation plays, moves me through the world. I bump into the door that I didn't realize was there, and then I do the calculation again and try to So moving in GoldenEye, moving props can cause big problems for the AI because the AI and doors are the worst case. Hinge doors are a nightmare.
Sure. I mean, okay, because Frigate, like, literally is like the insane level when it comes to this stuff, because on Frigate, the hostages have to escape. They have to get to their despawn point, and on you have to save 4 and 5 hostages on Secret and Double Agent, and so what it comes down to is basically like on Double Agent, we can save 5 hostages, do the objectives, and get to the end in a minute 5 or less, but the hostages like never escape in a minute 5 or less. So we just are jumping into the boat hoping that they've all escaped in the last frame or so, and it happens like literally maybe 1 in 1,000 runs or more.
Right.
And
so that's like it's like the control thing, but worse because there's a bunch of them.
Exactly. It's like 5 Natalyas at the end of control, and not only that, Natalia has 1 despawn point. These hostages, I think they all have 6, and I think the one on the bridge has a 7th. And the way we play the route, that one has to pick that rare 7th, which is like a few feet away from where he is. And so, like, it's a combination of hoping they all sort of pick their either, like, most optimal spot or, like, one of their most optimal spots. And, like, you add up all the odds of them picking it from 1 in 6. And then on top of that, you have to hope that they don't bump into guards to reroute and pick a new one. Or, like, I guess now the hinge doors, now we know, can also factor into it. Or, yeah.
Yeah, because I think the doors... the doors in the Frigate are hinged, aren't they?
Yes, yep.
Yeah, that's just a nightmare. Particularly when they... But you see, the other thing you see sometimes is a character moving toward a door, and then the characters, to go through the door, they trigger the door to open, and then they open in their face.
Yes.
I mean, they generally around doors, there are 2 pads on either side of the door to try to minimize that issue.
Oh. So, like, if a hostage is running and opens a door, on the other side of that door, now his path can split into 2 routes, basically.
Well, he'd go... I think you would probably... I think if you get that GoldenEye editor up...
Okay.
And look at, because the other thing about that is you can see, if you look at that editor, you'll be able to see on the pads the routes that the hostages, and it'll have all the pads. The scripts, I mean, they're quite hard to read, but the data is there.
I know Henrik has looked at it extensively and has like a lot of good knowledge on it.
Yeah. But I think that the things like you say, like for that, it is like, I mean, you're like you're hoping the lottery numbers come up when you're sitting waiting in the boat, aren't you?
Well, exactly, and then it makes it such an insane speedrun because the thing that really makes Frigate like so crazy is that pretty much all of the players who are like good at the game have a chance of getting a new world record if they get the lottery numbers.
The cards.
So it makes it absolutely insane. Yeah, no, I'm looking at a post here. I'll probably send you an email with a couple posts from this Henrik guy afterwards. But yeah, it's. I mean, he has this calculation saying the chances of perfect hostages on Double Agent are 1 in 10,737, and it's like you don't need necessarily perfect because the first 2 you save have like enough time to pick probably the best 3 spots. But yeah, so it makes it just absolutely nuts. And so yeah, I think he has looked at all the paths, but I can certainly ask him again for that stuff.
Yeah, I think, I mean, from a point of view of, I mean, I think it will largely just confirm things that you've worked out already.
Mm-hmm.
But it's probably nice to see the actual explanation as opposed to just having observed the outcome.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's kind of like a lot of the stuff is like we sort of have like an idea of how it works after just seeing it in practice so many times, right? But yeah, it's good to have like the confirmation. Okay, certainly. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the thing about the leans and the throwing stuff. Yeah, so that's just a bug. I can.
Cool.
And the reason it's a bug is so mines and stuff. You're running around and throwing stuff. Obviously, when you throw something, it has to inherit the speed that you're traveling at before you throw it.
Yes.
Because otherwise you get funny effects. So, if you're running forward, you threw something and it didn't inherit your running forward speed, then you just drop it on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
So that has to work. And that probably works really consistently and well. However, the leans are a bit of a fudge. So on the lean, it's like you're pressing a button and suddenly you're moving at a speed which you shouldn't really be able to move at.
Okay.
But you only move a very small distance. Yeah?
Well, exactly. So it doesn't seem like it's not intended that way, though. Because it's like if you're holding the aimer and then you hit the strafe, you do move like super fast, but you move that small distance.
And what happens is then, you're getting it frame perfect. So you're saying, on that frame, where you're moving super fast and you press throw, the logic for deciding what the grenade should be thrown at goes, how fast is he moving? Oh, he's moving really fast.
Exactly, yeah.
It wasn't deliberate. I mean, I described that to Martin, and we were both kind of going, oh yeah, it's clearly a bug.
Oh, that's really funny because, like, for me looking at it, it seems like it makes sense because you are moving that fast for one frame, right?
Yeah.
And so there's sort of, yeah.
Yeah, and it happens because the logic in the code is good logic. I mean, it's a logical thing.
Exactly.
However, from a game design point of view, it's like it doesn't make any sense. It's a bug because it requires a precision of interaction with a controller that you wouldn't expect most people to be able to attain.
Sure.
That makes it a bug. It's like kind of it's just too hard to do. And I mean, if we'd intended it was an intended behavior, then there would probably be somewhere in the game, you would have designed somewhere in the game where it was necessary.
Of course.
Yeah, it'd be like, there'd be some stupid objective where it's like, oh, we can't possibly destroy that up there, but maybe if you really tried.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, I didn't mean necessarily intended, but because you knew how fast you would move with those aiming strafes, if you guys knew there was at least a plausible, I guess. But that's cool. And there's sort of 3 different ways, 3 different sort of strengths of these leans.
Combine it with a crouch. You can combine it with an exit from a crouch as well, which I guess the exit from the crouch is probably adding another little velocity in there.
Yeah.
Which is standing up. So you're basically, you're getting your normal velocity probably from running diagonally as well, plus the exiting the crouch.
Exactly. And then, so yeah, no, it's just absolutely mad. The crazy thing is then, on top of that, sometimes we have this one called a glitchy lean, where it just randomly happens to go even further, and we don't know what causes that yet. It's kind of still like unexplored. If it's just like a kind of a low leg scenario or whatever, but it's massively inconsistent. But yeah, so that's really cool. And then
I guess with all these things as well, you kind of it's a requirement for you guys that it's played on actual hardware, isn't it?
Yes.
Because emulation throws a lot of these things all wrong.
Well, yeah, no, the old Nintendo 64 kind of emulates not true to the console, and that kind of made sense when you were telling me the Super Nintendo guys were like really strict in terms of how many frames they had to like save or whatever. And Nintendo 64, that wasn't as much of a requirement compared to the camera stuff.
Well, I think what happened was when if you look at the frame rates of Super Nintendo games and before, they're generally consistently high.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But the minute people started doing 3D stuff, so if you look at things like Star Fox or whatever with the 3D FX chip or the FX chips.
Mm-hmm.
And Stunt Race FX and things like that, the frame rates are appalling.
Yes.
Because, just the load on the machine, and then since then, the early 3D games, they were plagued by bad frame rates, and it's all because the issue with 3D stuff is that you can always make it look better and compromise the frame rate. And every game, the dev team makes a decision about what they're going to do. I mean, when we did the Time Splitters games, we were always trying to get good frame rates because we'd come from GoldenEye.
Sure.
Where if I could go back and change something on GoldenEye with a magic wand, it would be great if it ran at 30 all the time.
It would, yeah. It'd be cool.
Yeah, it'd be brilliant. It's a credit to the game that it's actually playable, even though it's often running at kind of sub 12 frames per second.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the frame rate goes south just when you need it as well.
Yes, no, exactly. Yeah, no, that's cool. No, like most of the speedrunners of the like Super Nintendo or original Nintendo games, they have no problem with playing on emulator because the console's always at 60 frames per second anyways, so it doesn't like have as much of an effect, certainly. Okay, there was there was another thing about the clipping. I don't know if you've seen the clip on the depot level, where we go sort of almost straight through a wall, but that one's pretty wild.
Is that? I've not seen it, but I imagine is it going through a wall into one of the kind of
roller. It's like the doors that roll upwards.
Okay. And you go through the door.
Pretty much. Here, I'll show you. Okay, let me link you in the Skype conversation. And basically, this video or whatever was the idea for it was known for like a very long time that it was possible. Like the guys on emulator, I guess they could turn Bond's collision down to 0. And they could like try to fit through every kind of crack in the game where it would, there might be a little hole. So they knew it was possible, and no one was ever able to replicate it on console until 2 years ago. And that's like, it had been known for 5 or 8 years at that point. And finally someone did it on console, and then everyone kind of was able to do it from there, but...
Hopefully, I've not got a great internet connection.
Okay, sure, yeah.
No, it's right. But so I'm waiting for it here. I suspect so with doors, all of the doors. I think the way it works is, if you think about a door, like a classic sliding door in Bond, in GoldenEye, it has to make a call about when you can move. Okay, I just saw him going through the door, right? I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember how the code works, but if you think about a sliding door, so imagine Bond's hit is a cylinder. So he's
Yep.
although actually, from what I said to you before, we didn't really use cylinders. It's actually a circle on the floor because it's done in 2D.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's his little circle around him. And the door has got a hitbox which is sliding to the side. So at some point, it's a bit like the same thing. It's the same thing with the we were talking about with the going between the pipes. As the door slides to, so first of all, just talking about left-right sliding doors. As the door slides to the side, there'll come a time when Bond's little circle can fit through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
For a door which slides vertically, yeah.
Yes.
We probably had to bodge that because we were only doing our hit for Bond was based on him. It's based on the 2D projection onto the ground.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if I think for a door that slides vertically, and I've got a really vague memory that we just put in a fudge number for it.
Okay.
So it would be like you're trying to move through this door. It starts off shut. We know that it's opening. At some point, at some fraction of being open, we should allow you to move through.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah? Because I bet you, if you go and play with those doors, I bet you that it doesn't matter whether you're crouched or not as to whether you can get through them. If it was a real thing in the real world and you were crouched, you'd be able to get through it sooner.
Well, exactly. And all the doors that go up like that, crouching doesn't help you go through them.
No.
And that makes sense now that, it makes perfect sense.
There'll be a number which will be like, when the door is 70% open, you can go through it.
Now, the thing with this door that you saw him run through is that it's a locked door and it's never open at any point.
What time is that on the video?
It should be, let's see, around 36 seconds. It's like, it is a door that goes up, down. But maybe it's not because that door's always locked. Like, we never actually see that door open up and down.
Oh, he just goes... So what happens at 36 seconds? So he's coming up to the door.
So, yeah, so he's coming up to the door, and literally he switches weapons, which, like, reduces the frame rate for, whatever, a frame. And I guess when the game's detecting his next position, it puts him on the other side of the door there. And, like, that's the only place this sort of thing really works. There's actually one other place on Depot where it works as well.
The other thing about that, I wonder, watching it, I can't work out what happens to him after he goes through the door. Because it kind of looks like he's just bounced backwards. But I guess it's because the place he gets to looks the same as the place he was at. Is that what's happening? Yeah,
so if you, like... Usually you're supposed to go through that sort of gray building on like, obviously, and you end up in this kind of hangar at the end.
Okay.
And then there's two doors, and then there's the train beyond that. And he sort of bypassed the entire gray building.
Okay. The one thing I notice about it is that when he's going up to that door, there's also if you look at the geometry on the ground, because there's a ramp there, there's a step up.
Yes.
I wonder if the step up is helping you to get through the door. From the same reason about the
like the T-junctions you were telling me about?
Oh, the thing we said about the using in the Aztec being able to jump up a big...
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So I can't work the logic quite out of my head, but basically, so if you do something so the way Martin explained the jumping up, the Aztec jumping up thing to me was that you normally can't jump up that height.
Uh-huh.
Yeah? But when the game is dropping frames and is compromised because it's had to uncompress the rocket launcher, so it's dropped the frames, it looks to see where you would be based on the speed you were moving and based on the time that's passed since it last checked. So it's kind of like, you're here, you're moving at this speed, it's 5 frames later, so you should be 5 times further along. And then Martin was saying that it probably, the reason the jump up thing happens is that it doesn't bother to check the vertical distance.
Okay.
It's only it's trying to do a quick calculation, and for some reason it's only done it in 2D. So maybe there.
Well, because
it just looks very suspicious that door has a
little ramp.
Has a little ramp, and you're not going up the ramp. You're cutting a corner on the ramp.
Yes.
So when Bond hits that, normally, if you strafe backwards and forwards along there, you'd be bumping up and down.
Yes.
And I wonder, it's like that bumping up and down is happening just at the very edge of that door.
Yep.
That door is never ever open. Is it?
It's permanently locked on all difficulties. No guards roll it up, anything like that.
Okay, so the door. I mean, you could find out by looking at the setup, but I suspect the door is actually is a door as opposed to being part of the background.
Mm-hmm.
But it'll be locked, so it's never doing that. So I think for that, I wouldn't look at that. I don't think that's a bug because of something the door is doing about being a sliding up and down door, because I think it's never considering about sliding up and down. It's just sitting there.
Yep.
But I think it might be a bug caused by the fact that it's a fairly unique case that you're able to hit the edge of a door or another prop by bouncing up a step.
Definitely.
So it's more, I think that's more like a general glitch of being able to intersect with a prop, but the prop just happens to be a door. And
sure.
It just happens to, the prop just happens to be a door, and it just happens to be in a place that makes it a really good shortcut.
Well, yeah, exactly, and that one was especially crazy because, like I say, like the guys who would look into the code and whatnot figured it out. I want to say in 2007 or 8, and we would all occasionally try to run into it and see what happened, and it never worked. And then for one guy in 2015, after 8 years of us playing the game and trying it. It worked, and then we realized, like, oh my god, this can actually work, and then it gives you the confidence that it can actually work, and so that
Can people do that consistently?
Well, so no. Now there are 1 or 2 guys, who have hit it maybe 30 or 50 times, and everyone else is like maybe once or twice they get their new personal record and they move on.
I suspect the more you can make it drop frames as you're hitting that corner, the more likely that is to work.
And so we've, like, for the years when we couldn't get it working, we would do stuff like we'd load all the guards, we'd have all these explosions going on, and we'd try it, and we still wouldn't get it to work. Yeah, and I agree with your logic there, but in practice it never worked out that way.
So all he does, when he hits it is he's just dropping the gun. Is he going to unarmed?
Yes. Yep. And he's also shot, just moments before he's shot, into the train, which alerts the 2 guards. We call it the train shot. And so those guards... and so, like, you'll see objective A completed come up before he opens the train door. And so that...
He just cracks a shot off down that little...
And, yeah, so that... The train shot would save like 3 seconds going the intended route because they also open one of the big roller doors.
That causes them to open the door because they want to come toward you.
Exactly. So there's like kind of 2 things that are creating a leg there: the train shot plus the weapon switch. Yeah, no, that one is really insane, and kind of a cool historical thing that we couldn't get to work for ages, and then finally it happened.
The other thing is that, again, you'd need to pull the data out. So, with those roller doors, because there's a bunch of them in that level, isn't there? There's all the there's all those massive doors on the hangars that have got loads of things in them. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So the way those doors would work I think, when I was doing the setup, is that in order to put one of those doors in the level, I would go into the background graphics file, the file that an artist had made, and I would draw a cuboid box where the door was going to go.
Okay.
So you kind of but in the case of the big roller doors, it'll be a really large, very thin box.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and it fills that space. Okay, and then in the setup data, I would tell it that is a door that slides upwards. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. And then, in order to make the thing work about Bond being able to decide when he's able to move through the door as it's opening, I would put, I'm pretty sure that, I'm not 100%, but I think this is how it worked. I would then put in a fraction of the door being open, which was the time that Bond could move through it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
But if you think about it, that fraction would be completely bespoke for that particular door, because I might have a really big one somewhere, or I might have one like this one, where it's a different size.
Sure.
Yeah. So if the door was 15 foot tall, then the fraction would probably be like, I don't know, 70% or 30% open.
Yep.
And I get through. If the door was, I don't know, 10 foot tall, then the fraction would be different.
Okay.
It's got to get to a stage where when Bond moves, his camera isn't going to clip through the door. It might be that, and this is just complete speculation, it might be that for that door there, the number is wrong because we never made it to be a door that could be open. So I would put the door in because there was a hole there in the background. The door's been put in to block that hole, to stop you from going through there, which is to try to force you to go round because there was some other setup and the other way in there, or just to make the level a bit longer. I put the door in and fix it to be locked, but I'm never going to open it. So I never actually get to the stage where I go and check what that number should be.
Okay, sure.
So maybe maybe the number's wrong, but we could, and that might also contribute to
why we can get through there.
I don't know, there's a bunch of maybes there, but I'm just trying to think.
Of course. No,
it's a very unique door because it's in a slightly strange place. It was clearly looking at it, it was clearly put there just to make the level longer, or to force you to go round. I mean, the depot was a funny level because it's in GoldenEye we're doing the setup. Long linear corridor levels are the easiest ones to set up. So things like the silo and stuff like that.
Sure.
Because you never have the problem of the level of everyone just running in and being on top of you. You've got to work your way through them. In the depot, it's also you're trying to, if you get more than about 8 guards active at once, the frame rate starts to go wrong.
Yep.
So the depot, and I know the depot was one of the later levels that I set up, because it's got, the later levels tend to have more features in them.
Okay.
Like for instance, all of the ceiling guns and the big terminal graphic displays and stuff in there.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, they've been put in as just to try and make it look a bit busier.
Sure.
But those things, like the really fancy terminals, they don't look fancy by modern standards. We had to do that because there had to be something in Severnaya on the wall, on the big monitor.
Yeah, sure.
And then, so we had some very simple stuff for doing the, some little scrolling textures and world maps and text and stuff. And then late in the day, when I was setting up the Aztec level, Carl had built the geometry for the Moonraker vaulted room with all the monitors on it.
Yep.
And it looked a bit crap if we just put in the monitors we had. So we had to change the way we could do the monitors to make them, because in that room, all the monitors in that room actually run the same script, but it's random. So when you go in there,
okay.
to make it look like there's lots of monsters doing different stuff, but they've all kind of just done, they're all running the same thing, where they pick a random picture and do some random effect on it. But they all start off the same. I think if you walk into that room and look up at the start, more of the monsters will be doing the same stuff as each other.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. But in the depot, that's what makes me realise the depot was set up later, because it's got kind of it's got features that weren't necessary for the depot.
Sure.
Borrowed from other levels, and also the depot. I think the depot and both of the 7-Eye exterior levels have got stuff going on where characters actually despawn, which was not the case for many of the other levels.
Okay, sure.
So the problem with 7-Eye exterior is it's an enormous space. And whenever guards start coming towards you, if you run away from them, then they just end up spending all of their time running after you.
Sure.
In that level, if a guard ends up further away from you than a certain distance, he despawns.
And then a new one spawns in his place.
And then it spawns another one. It spawns another one based on where you are. So it has a. In fact, I probably could dig it out, because I gave a talk, which whenever they get it properly edited and put it up on YouTube, I'll send a link out to you for it, which is just a kind of like making of GoldenEye talk.
Sure.
But I dug out some old maps I had, which were the maps that I worked from when I was setting up the levels, and certainly for the 7-Eye ones, it's a map that I guess Carl or Duncan drew, and I've over the top of it marked out. It's all divided up into blocks, and the blocks are the blocks that I used in the script for deciding where to spawn guys based on where you are.
For sure. That one actually is quite significant for the... I don't know if you know, we play the license to kill modes, for example. We have these custom settings on 007 mode. Either...
hard.
Exactly. So either everything's maxed out, which is dark license to kill, or the enemies have no health, so it's like the license to kill multiplayer mode. And anyway, so what happens is on Surface 1, or we call it Surface 1, 7-Eye exterior, the guards, once you kill the, I guess, general with one of the keys for a cabin key or whatever, guards then can start spawning. So you have to hope that the 3 guards who spawn are Clob guards. If they're snipers, they're going to hit you 100% of the time and you're going to die. So you have to hope they're Clob guards. Now, what will sometimes happen, and now this explains it actually, is that you'll have this set up with Clob guards, you'll be proceeding through the level and not dying, so you know you have the right spawns, but then you'll get sniped randomly late in the level. So what's probably happened there is one of them's despawned and a sniper's respawned closer to you. And that makes a lot of sense now. And then another thing I want to say on Surface 1 and on Jungle is they both have these ladders you climb up at some point. And so you can also warp up those ladders the same as the Aztec pit. And we do that all the time. You just switch a weapon and you go right up. And then they're usually pretty easy to do as well.
Yeah, because the ladder code for movement. Actually, that's in fact, I've got a document that has. It's just a working document with my list of levels it was kind of when we were in crunch, and it was a document which was trying to plot out when levels would be set up, and it has kind of handwritten notes saying, well, we can't do this level until the ladder software is done.
Okay.
So because the ladder, again, it's a complete bodge, because any vertical movement of because the way the stands work for movement and it being slightly two-dimensional, any vertical movement of the player is a bodge.
Sure.
Yeah, and the ladders are a bodge. So there's all kinds of problems, and you can see it. You know, if you look at another example of showing that the ladders weren't properly thought out in the design is that there are no animations for characters on ladders.
That's true. They just kind of pop up, yeah.
Yeah, so that's just because when the game was being designed, or when the animation set was being done, which was done by motion capture and then cleaned up, it was kind of fairly rudimentary motion capture back in the day. The animations were done for all the things that we thought we'd need animations for, and we forgot to do ladders.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Okay, so I mean, we've been talking for quite some time. There's a couple things I wanna get to for sure. I think we're gonna have to chat again sometime after this, to be honest.
Yeah, I think if you go back to the guys and there's some kind of fallout from it or some other ideas. I mean, it's fun for me because it's really.
Of course, yeah.
Like for instance, when you start talking about that roller door, I would not have remembered that.
Sure.
And in fact, that's probably something you could go and check in the setup code. You could probably find out the numbers for those doors. I mean, I don't know whether it would help much, but it could confirm whether there's something funny about it.
Sure, I'll ask Henrik to take a look. Yeah. Definitely want to ask you. Okay, for one, like, did you ever think that on the 007 settings, fully maxed out, we'd be able to beat any level, let alone every single one?
No. I mentioned that to Martin last night, and he was just going, "No way," because those. It's funny, those sliders. They were put in just for
Of course, yeah.
But I mean, an example of our personal assessment of how difficult the game was is that when the two bonus levels, the Aztec and the Egyptian, because they were bonus levels, it was pretty much fine for us to make them as difficult as we thought we could.
Sure.
And I remember, because Martin and I have both reminisced about this too, with the Aztec, we kind of got to a stage with the levels where, because we were going into ship mode and kind of mastering the game, we got to a stage where it was kind of, you can't really change things anymore. Everything goes into lockdown.
Yeah.
And the bonus levels, because they were bonus levels, it was always kind of safe to be fiddling around with them. Because, for instance, if we inadvertently made the Aztec really, really, really hard to beat, it wouldn't be a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's there for, if you're playing it on 00, it's there for the hardcore player who's unlocked the whole game and wanting an extra challenge. However, you don't want to make it so that you definitely can beat it.
Mm-hmm.
So those levels, I think I can't remember now exactly, but I know that when we were finally setting up the Aztec, and it's generally a pretty uncompromising level.
It is. It's very hard for us still. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that was where we were having our fun. So Martin and I remember sitting one night with that, and we made it as hard as we could make it, where one of us could get through it. So, particularly even the very start of that level, it's really easy to get killed in the first 5 seconds.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
You just lean out at the wrong time, or just don't get the headshot. And we'd set it up and check that we could do it, or check that we could do all the parts of it separately at that difficulty. And then we just turned the difficulty up ever so slightly.
I remember hearing, it might have been you or it might have been Martin, but I remember hearing a talk maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. Where the same thing was kind of said. You guys could get through it, and you just amped it up a notch. I don't know how you, like, did you add in an extra guard or more accuracy?
I think that we had, it's like on that level, I suspect that we were able to set the level has got the it's effectively using those sliders.
Yes.
So we have there's a setting that is hidden from the player.
Yes.
setting for that level with the difficulties. Yeah. So I think we might have just tweaked it ever so slightly. And certainly we didn't turn them up to the max.
Of course.
Which you know, the max is just there for, you know what, you're never going to be able to beat it if you believe it. But it turns out you guys can.
Yeah. No, I mean, I definitely, we kind of could tell over the years, like, the double agent was based off of those settings for sure. And like later on, jungle, as to control, the accuracy just kind of got amped up. And maybe like the enemy reaction time as well. But the health and damage was always consistent.
Yeah. I think the thing is the health and the damage kind of have to be consistent because playing it, you know, there's no set rule for how many hits you can take, but it's pretty, it's pretty fixed. I can't remember how it works. There's the way it works is the amount of damage you take is based on the amount of damage you have left. So particularly for,
I think that's only on agent.
Okay, right. Okay, that's right. Okay.
And then, yeah.
Got it. Yeah, here's another interesting thing. When we made the game, when we were in dev, we always played the game on the higher difficulty. Okay. And I think it was always probably something close to 00.
Okay, sure.
So whenever I'd set things up, I'd play them and test it and stuff, I always played it on that difficulty. And it was only as we were going into testing that it's quite interesting because I think it happened with almost everyone's games. When you make the game, you always end up really good at it compared to other people.
Of course.
Certainly at the start. So when that went to testing, particularly Japan, NCL, came back and said the game is just insanely hard. And we started, we put in the dial the difficulty down, and obviously dial the difficulty down for agent. And we made it so we thought it was laughably easy.
Sure.
Expecting them to say, now you've made it too easy. And they said, no, that's right.
Wow.
So when the game was released, I remember everyone on the team was just thinking, it's just ridiculously easy on Agent. And then it's funny because when I go back and play it now,
that's really funny.
I go back and play it now, and I've done it a couple of times where you want to show somebody something, and it needs to be on Secret Agent or 00.
Yeah.
And then you just get a complete drubbing. You just get
definitely no 00 is unforgiving on. There's no level that's like easy on 00 Agent for sure.
Just a moment's inattention and you're
exactly. If you don't know what you're doing, I mean, oftentimes we'll see speedrunners from other games who are like great Mario or Zelda players, and they'll try GoldenEye and they like can't beat Facility Agent. It's always crazy. Okay, the last thing I want to ask today certainly is about the cheat times, and also because it kind of relates. Like, did you guys know that the side strafing was going to be faster? I mean, I'm sure you did.
Well, that's a mistake. Yeah, so this.
Okay.
Yeah, so I can't remember whether we were aware of it before the game was finalized, and then just the thing is when you get really late in the testing cycle, particularly for cartridge games. So I mean, the world has changed now. Mm-hmm. People ship things in desperate messes now.
Of course, yeah.
But somebody was going to go and burn a first production run of several 100,000 cartridges, and you're not allowed to fiddle with it at the last minute.
Of course.
If you break. So I think that the testers will have started to notice that diagonal running was fast. So I can't imagine we were completely unaware of it, but I think probably it was at a stage where the thinking was, if we change this, we might break other things. I mean, you'd be 99.9% certain it wouldn't break anything, but you couldn't put your hand on your heart and say, absolutely, this is not going to have any knock-on effect.
No.
So we either knew very late in the day or pretty much immediately afterwards. And and it's a classic bug. It's like, you get, because you're on the diagonal, you get the square root of 2 as a speed instead of 1.
Yeah, no, exactly. And
it's 1.4 times faster than.
Okay, that's cool. Now, because the thing is, Streets Agent and Statue Secret Agent, the target time is like really tight if you're not strafing. So it's like, were those decided?
Okay, well then that confirms what I was just thinking, which is that we will have known before it was released that you could go faster by diagonal movement.
Okay.
Because those all of those target times came from testing. So what would happen is, the people at Rare or the people doing the testing in NCL or in Treehouse NOA would feed back to us on when we started doing that. I mean, at some point we decided to put the cheats unlockable by times, and then it would be, okay, well then we need a whole bunch of times. And the times came from what testers were deciding was feasible. So somebody would have had to have logged those times in order for them to go in as being target time.
Sure. Yeah. No. I think the Statue Secret Agent, it's 3:15, and I think it's might not even be doable if you're not strafing.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, exactly. We know all the optimal routes and tricks and stuff, and still you can't nail it. So it's okay. So the thing is, obviously, Facility 00 Agent is 205 for invincibility, and Archives 00120 for invisibility. Those are pretty solid.
And I remember, it's funny, I remember when the game came out, my brother had completely unlocked all of the cheat. I'd gone over to see him. He lives in Melbourne. It was like the year after or something. And he had a copy of the game which had everything unlocked apart from the facility.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
And I remember sitting a whole day consistently failing to unlock, because he said, well, you must be able to do this because you made the game.
Wow, that's really funny.
And I said, well, no, because it's got this random thing in it, and you got to have, what to me was a very good time, plus the randomness has to fall.
Well, the randomness is your likeness in the game.
Exactly.
it has. So sometimes, I think there's 7 positions that Dr. Doak can be in, and when we're running the game, we'll have an amazing run. We have to hope for the best 1 in 7, and you're not there, so we'll be cursing your name all the time, Yeah. So okay, so that some testers were able to get below 205.
There's absolutely no way that those times would have gone in without them being verified achievable times.
Wow. Yeah, no, 120 on Archives is pretty insane for if you don't know the game, so cool.
And also the way it will have worked is that, as you say, some of them are particularly hard. But I think also when you look at it, we will have tried to mix up, for instance, the like you say, the facility one. It's a hard time to get, and also it's a fairly long level, so there's a lot of effort needs to go in, and because of the reps with the randomness, but it's unlocking a really good thing.
Yes.
So we will have had a reasonable handle on how difficult those things were to do, and then it sounds like the Archives one is actually an example of something where you really need to know the level to get the time.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Yeah, and then Runway Agent is 5 minutes, and it takes 20 seconds, and of course
that's right. Yeah, so that's a gimme. I mean, that's just it's like you've got the unlockables in the game.
Yeah.
You're trying to just draw people's attention to them that they're there.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah,
cool.
Of course, in the modern world, you'd have to pay for them.
Well, yeah, exactly. I know. Yeah, of course.
a whole other.
That sounds funny. Yeah, I'd like to hear your perspectives on the modern gaming world sometime for sure. But yeah, no, I think that's almost 2.5 hours. I think
It's been really good to talk to you.
Dude, no, it's been awesome. It's been a great. I mean, I feel like we could chat multiple times for this length. So, no, that's been really cool. I'm gonna certainly, try to get something from this on YouTube or something, and get the guys to listen to it and see what they think. And I'm sure we'll talk again sometime. It was really good. Yeah.
Okay. Cheers, Ryan.
Awesome. Yeah. No, it was a true pleasure. So thank you so much. And yeah, we'll be in touch.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
You too.